A surprising new study on breast cancer shows it may be related to another serious condition. Our Judy Alley now with more on that. Judy.
Can a history of having migraine headaches actually have an influence on a woman's risk of developing breast cancer? An intriguing new study suggests that possibility. Joining us now via satellite from Seattle is the lead author of this study, Dr. Christopher Lee from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, tell me about this study.
Well, this is a study that included nearly 3,500 women locally here in the Seattle area. And what we were interested in looking at was the relationship between a history of migraine and breast cancer. And what we observed was that women who reported a history of migraine actually had a 30% lower risk of breast cancer compared to women without a history of migraine. And this is the first study to look at this relationship.
Wow, what do we know about migraines and their association with the hormone levels?
Well, what we know is that both breast cancer and migraines are hormonally related diseases. There's a lot of literature showing that breast cancer is stimulated by hormones such as estrogen. And it's also well known that migraine is also a hormonally related disease, and that it's two to three times more common in women than in men. And several of the triggers for migraine in women have a hormonal component to them.
Okay, how does that association link with the breast cancer risk?
Well, our hypothesis when we started the study was that since we had two hormonally related diseases, that there could be a relationship between the two. And so that is why we looked at this association to begin with. And our finding of a reduction in risk with breast cancer with migraine was somewhat surprising, but consistent maybe with what we know about the biology of migraine, in that it seems that periods of a woman's life when her estrogen levels fall are associated with the onset of migraine. And so it could be that there's just a different hormonal environment in women who have a history of migraine versus women who don't.
Dr. Lee, do we have to be cautious in interpreting this data?
Yes, we certainly do. Again, as I mentioned before, this is the very first study looking at this association. And so before we go too far with this, we want to make sure that we can validate it in other populations. And right now we're actively doing research now looking at this question in other research settings. And so far, though, our preliminary data look quite consistent. But again, we don't know what the biology here is. And so another thing that we're doing is we're actually recontacting many of the women in this study to see if there are certain characteristics of migraine or whether the medications that women who suffer from migraine take that may be responsible for part of this relationship.
Okay, so if women in our audience suffer from migraines, they still have to be very vigilant about breast cancer screening, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, the best protection we have against breast cancer mortality right now is early detection, particularly regular mammographic screening. And so it's important for all women, regardless of whether or not they have a history of migraine, to continue to get their regular screening.
Was this a surprise for you, this study?
It was a surprise in that, again, it hasn't been reported before, and it is unusual to find a completely new relationship with breast cancer since it's been a disease that's so well studied that it's not often that we find these new associations. But again, we thought that since both diseases have a hormonal component that there might be a relationship, and so it's something that's very interesting that we will definitely continue to pursue.
When you think health, think IRU.